Hey, what's going on, everyone? Ty here, Bench Card Media. I had to stop what I was doing today, take a brief break from work, and address the CPI numbers that came out today. For those that don't pay attention to economic data or watch the news, CPI is the Consumer Price Index, and it's a measurement of prices, of inflation. And we've been preaching this for months here on the channel about how inflation impacts the hobby. And boy, oh boy, it's interesting to me. The stat came out today. So CPI is up 6.2%, the highest increase they've seen since, wait for it, December 1990. I did a video about 6 months ago about what happened in the early 90s with sports cards. I went back and looked at New York Times articles and other articles written. That was the junk wax era, guys. There's no specific parallel between the CPI and the junk wax era. But hey, take it for what it's worth. I thought it was quite funny. Here we are talking about the junk slab era and all the craziness with overprinting right now. And the CPI has been the highest since December 1990. Insane. All right, so here's the thing with inflation. And I'll link the previous videos I've done, but inflation is a big deal in the hobby, and it impacts you in so many different ways. Now, just think about this for a minute. And a quick shout out to Economic Ninja. My notes are on the back of junk wax boxes, 1988 donruss. Card prices. We know card prices for sealed wax are up. They're up. A hobby, they're up considerably. They have been going up considerably for the last few months and years. Retail, we went from 6 months ago being able to buy retail at $20 a blaster and other SKUs for kind of that lower MSRP. But you know what? Walmart, Target, Fanatics, they all say, well, screw the middleman. Why would we let those guys go and scrape up the profits? Let's just mark it up to $30, $35. So we saw a 50% increase. In addition to a lot of these prices that we see in sealed wax, we see what we call shrinkflation, which is basically inflation simply by reducing the amount of stuff you get. So maybe prices didn't increase as much in certain products, but you know what? You get a couple cards less per pack. You get a little bit less content. So you're getting less for your dollar, which is really the definition of inflation, right? The spending power of your dollar. Grading fees. A year ago, you could grade with the de facto standard in the hobby, PSA, for $10 to $15 for an economy submission, 12 to 15, if you will. We're at a point now where SGC is $30, the third best in the hobby. Hybrid grading, which is, I don't know, fourth, fifth best in the hobby, is 25 to 35. I mean, insane. We're at 300% to go from de facto standard to third to fourth best. Mind-blowing increase in just the grading cost. Card supplies, we all know how that's been, right, the last year. All card supplies have gone up, if you can even get any. Massive supply shortages. So you're dealing with that and inflation. Shipping supplies. All of shipping supplies, from labels to ink to tape, up 20 to 40% in the last 6 months. Shipping cost. USPS has increased their cost 2 times in the last 6 months. UPS, FedEx have slowly increased their costs, mainly because of gasoline charges. And guess what? They've added delays factored into your shipping. So a little bit of shrinkflation wrapped into the old the shipping costs. Oh, gas is up 40%. Oh, and we do have to eat, right? Food across the board up 25 to 50% for all kinds of different food. A dollar you would have spent in 1990, so back 32 years ago, is now worth 33 cents. So here's the point. Inflation affects us directly in the hobby. It affects you because of all these things I just named. Things that you have to spend money on if you want to run a business, if you want to collect, if you want to do certain things. All of those costs are wrapped into the cost of being a collector, cost of being a sports card investor, whatever it may be. So when you see CPI is up 6.2% year over year, and month over month it keeps increasing, right? You have to stop and think, okay, what does that mean for me? If prices continue at this pace, what's going to happen to cards? What's going to happen to cards? Now, we can look back in different periods of time, like we've talked about in the past, and you can see that cards have been a decent hedge. But we're at a point now where, like we've said, Slabs are just, I mean, they are printing slabs. They are pushing slabs out at hundreds of thousands, per week. And the junk slab era is upon us. But I think it's done two things that are really important to note. One, I think this junk slab era has driven a deeper and wider wedge between gem mint slabs and everything else. Because yes, there are more PSA 10s. There are more BGS 9.5s and 10s. There's more SGC 10s. But you know what? There's a whole heck of a lot more PSA 9s, PSA 8s, and all the ones below. And I think you just widen the gap between scarcity being the gem mints, and everything else. So that's one. Two, you are seeing a massive shift take place. I'm going to call this the great shift in the hobby, where you're seeing, and I know this because I've talked to a lot of collectors, a lot of long-time collectors the last few weeks and months. And these collectors are smart. They've been through all the cycles. And you know what's happening? They're consolidating. They're getting rid of the fluff in their collections, and they're latching onto, they're doubling down on the players, the cards, the scarcity, the condition of things they know are actually good hedges. Vintage, high grades on certain modern cards, certain semi-modern cards, very high grades, low numbered stuff. And they're saying, you know what? All the rest of the things out there, you boys, you little boys, little girls, you can play with that stuff, because you know what? It's not going to be a hedge, and that's going to be the stuff that gets cut out from the knees first, and it already has been. So I just want to remind you, I want to use this as a platform to remind you to be wise. Please be wise with the way you spend your hobby dollars, because there are certain things that will work. They will. Like the whole hobby's not going to get totally crushed. It's just not. We talk about the negative side of this and how it doesn't affect us, and it will affect us. Look, I'm a premier example of a guy that's put a lot of money into modern stuff, and that's okay, and I've done well with it too. But I know, I'm seeing it. I've been telling you, you got to start using the modern stuff to get into stuff that's going to be protected, that's going to stand the test of time, and already has stood the test of time. The vintage, the graded, the older stuff, the scarcity and wax, those things, you can still partake in the hobby and enjoy price appreciation through this inflationary cycle by sticking to stuff that is proven, that is going to work. Okay. So yes, inflation matters. It affects us. It's driving out people. The other thing I will say is card prices. When you see Walmart and Target cut out that, the flippers out of the retail wax. Okay, some people say it's a great thing. Get rid of them. But you know what? I don't like that for one particular reason, and that is it takes out an entire segment of the hobby. And yes, I wasn't the one partaking in that. I wasn't the one going and grabbing that stuff or even buying that stuff on the secondary market. But when you cut out a piece of the hobby, you lose a percentage of the people that are excited and driving up excitement in card prices. And so that does affect a lot of what we see kind of flow down the chain with these new collectors entering the market. I know a lot of guys that were just loving the hobby because they could go get cards, they could open some for cheap, and they could flip some and cover their costs. They can't do any of that stuff now, and they've just kind of left. Some of them have stayed, but a lot of them have left. And some of you are going to argue, they don't need to be here anyway, whatever. But you know what? For the sake of the growth of the hobby, having those people enter is a good thing, and that segment is basically being pushed out. So Walmart and Target are collecting the profits. Fanatics is collecting the profits. And those guys aren't. And they're adjusting. But whatever. Inflation is real. It affects you. It affects the hobby. Be smart. Invest in things that work. Invest in things that will stand the test of time. Best of all, have yourself an amazing week. We'll see you.